The only reason I'm bringing this up now is that what he said is relevant to what I do, and I feel that it's useful for me to go into some detail and provide my own perspective. It really reminds me, actually, in my own studies of history, I remember reading a little over 2,000 years ago, in the days of ancient Rome, the Carthaginian general Hannibal took his army and some elephants and went up around Europe, over the Alps, down into the Italian peninsula, and kicked Roman butt for about 10 years. And for generations after this, Roman mothers would tell their children when they tucked them in at bed at night, be a good little boy or girl, or Hannibal's going to get you. Hannibal was the Roman boogeyman. And today, ufology has John Alexander. One of the comments John made the other day was that, well, old documents don't prove present interest. Well, I would beg to differ. There's hundreds of very good government documents that prove high-level interest and concern, sometimes grave concern, by high-level officials about the phenomenon of UFOs, in particular those that violate sensitive airspace, and this does happen, and it continues to happen. One, a 1947 document from General Nathan Twining, who later became a four-star general, said that the phenomenon is real, not visionary or fictitious. So it's not make-believe. It's important to remember this because in 1947, of course, the Air Force and the government in general was telling people, well, it's not real. It is visionary and it is fictitious. And what Twining was saying to another general is, no, it's actually quite real. And then he went on and described in some detail, really striking detail, some of the characteristics of these military reports, military sightings, such as circular or elliptical in shape, and my favorite, flat on bottom, domed on top. Remember, that's 1947. That's rather important. A 1949 FBI memo, which stated the attitude from the intelligence community on UFOs, stating that the matter was considered top secret. One of my favorites from a CIA report that went to the director of the CIA, Walter Beadle Smith. At this time, the reports of incidents convince us that there is something going on that must have immediate attention. Sightings of unexplained objects at great altitudes and traveling at high speeds in the vicinity of major U.S. defense installations are of such nature that they are not attributable to natural phenomena or known types of aerial vehicles. Wow. It's very hard to be a lot more explicit than that when you're writing a memo to your boss at the head of the CIA. And then, of course, the inexplicable of the inexplicables, the 1976 DIA report on the encounter over Tehran back in the days of the Shah when Iran was a U.S. ally, and in which two F-4 fighter interceptors in succession had key instrumentation disabled by this unknown object that was able to, well, completely outclass them. And that was a three-page, single-space typewritten memo that went to, among other people, the President of the United States, the Director of the CIA, Henry Kissinger. We know for sure that in the recent history there have been continuing cases of our jets going after these things. All right? And this happened in post-9/11 America, right outside our nation's capital. Many witnesses saw this. You had F-16s chasing several, initially, orangish, bluish objects. What's interesting about that case, by the way, is that the Air Force did confirm that they scrambled interceptors. One anonymous Air Force rep told the media that the object blipped off the radar. And then, of course, we have Stevensville, Texas, 2008. That's not an actual photograph. Please don't let me be accused of fakery or photoshoppery. This enormous object silently coming in high speed and then stop, and then at some point take off, being pursued by a bunch of F-16s. The Air Force initially denied this. Then they said, oh, well, he said, people probably just saw the reflections of commercial aircraft landing in the distance. Look, I wouldn't want to be the Air Force guy to talk to the media either. What are you going to say, really? You got to say something. So, yo, yeah, a Walmart-sized flying object is over the... That's not really going to fly, so to speak. So you have to lie. But eventually they were forced into admitting that there were F-16s on a training mission. So in other words, there was some corroboration of the witness counts. There is concern. They're not disinterested in UFOs. When you scramble jet after jet after jet to intercept an unknown object, there's a protocol in place. There have to be reports that are filed. These have to go up someone's chain of command into some destination. Someone's reviewing these reports. They're going somewhere. Well, it so happened Sarbacher was alive still. Interesting lead to follow up on. And guess what? Sarbacher confirmed, absolutely confirmed the meeting and went further. He ended up writing a 2-page, single-spaced, typewritten letter to Steinman, giving a great amount of detail about this indeed, and confirming the fact that there was a program to study this phenomenon and to study the technology, and that he himself had been part of a team to study landing sites. Better yet, Sarbacher gave the name of another scientist who was also still alive, Dr. Eric Walker, who is pictured down there. Eric Walker was one of the most perfectly positioned defense scientists of the 1950s and 60s. Knew everyone there was to know, friend of Dwight Eisenhower and so on and so on. Later became president of Penn State University for many years. In short, Walker gave a great deal of confirmation about the existence of, yes, MJ-12 or some organization like it, and a whole lot more. Back in the late 90s, Admiral Wilson was head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and later became head of the Defense Intelligence Agency under Presidents Clinton and Bush. What had happened was that in April of 1997, Dr. Stephen Greer and astronaut Edgar Mitchell met with him about deep black, that is, unacknowledged special access programs concerning ET technology and apparently bodies, and to discuss the fact that these were rogue programs that did not seem to be under formal Pentagon control. 2 months went by after the meeting, and Wilson knocked on a bunch of doors and finally knocked on the right door, found the program, and was denied access. He was denied access because he did not have a need to know. And what was interesting from my perspective is that he was denied access not by military people, but by attorneys of the private entities that controlled this program. But the other thing that they pointed out was the domination of the IC by private entities, private contract. Our formal structures have been, let's say, hijacked by powerful private entities. Story after story about not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars that are said to be missing. If you follow up on the 2.6 trillion, it was later amended to 2.3, and then in subsequent years, the Pentagon said, well, we got that number down. So like a year later, it was down to like 500 billion only. So I'm thinking, okay, I can sort of get where you're coming from, but here's my problem with this. All right, the Pentagon later announced, a number of years later, that they got that number down to 0. Now, that's like a kid who fails every class every year and then doesn't want his mom and dad to know that he failed English this year, so he takes the F and he changes it not to a D, not to a C, but to an A. If you're going to cheat, make it believable, people. So they say they got it down to 0. Yeah. I mean, you can just see what happens here. Some guy at the top says, I want that down to 0, damn it, and then they just do it. So, okay. So the fact is, I mean, look, we can say that we're talking about many, many, many billions of dollars that do go missing. We have a classified world that has layer within layer within layer within layer. Black projects are nested. It's not just like you have one black project. You have black projects within other black projects within others.